The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning. This is Divya, and I'm thrilled to be here because it's time with you folks. You, my audience, you are the soul of the show. So thank you to each and every one of you who have got the books, because partial profits from my books, especially Expert to Influencer and the Entrepreneur's Garden, go to kiva.org and we help entrepreneurs all across the globe. And keep that circle of kindness going. Find that hour of time every month and without any strings attached, help somebody out. And now what we are going to do is we will be bringing our guest in. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here.
Well, wonderful to have you here. So, Christina, share with us, if you recall, any moment from your childhood that's fresh in your memory even today.
Yeah. So it's a part of my childhood that I think defined me, and it's like this very vivid memory. So I was born overseas. I lived in Brazil, but I was the daughter. My parents were Cuban expats, so I went to the American school, and that provided me a certain lifestyle, living overseas. And I remember very clearly, I must have been in the second grade or the third grade, going to school in my air-conditioned car with the driver driving us to school. And on the other side of the car, outside, was a kid my age begging for money. And I realized, at that moment, it's like I didn't really do anything to deserve being the one inside the car. I was born. I was just lucky that I was born to my family. And he didn't do anything to deserve begging for money on the street. And from that moment on, I think I've always had the sense of responsibility, or the sense of, I have been given all access to education, access to things that so many people haven't. I need to do something with it. And that's a very clear line from my childhood to who I am today.
Wow, that's very profound for a second or third grader. So, you're 7 or 8 years old.
Exactly.
And it goes back to very much so, we as children are more observant and more aware of our situation and surroundings than as adults, because so many times, especially I go to New York all the time. And what I find is that people are so busy, they're talking on the phone and they're just passing, and every city has its own rhythm. They're walking at a certain pace, and you can tell who are the locals and who are the visitors. So visitors will look around, they're curious, but local people, they just keep on going. And then that brings us back that, are we passing through life, or are we creating awareness for ourselves and for others? So as you continued growing up, did you have any specific interests?
I did. And I think that it's funny because I went to college. I went to Wellesley College, and I remember calling my parents and saying, I've decided I'm going to be a teacher. And my parents says, that's great, but then you're going to quit and you're going to go to the community college, because I'm not going to pay. They were paying for my college for you to be a teacher. And I believed them. So I went on into Wall Street instead of being a teacher. But over time, like everything that I did had to do with this education side of things. So even in investment banking, I was the person, I did mergers and acquisitions, and I was the person that they would come to present, to write the story of the company and get things ready. So I've always been in that teaching communication role. And eventually, when I had my kids, I became a preschool teacher, much to my parents' horror. But I feel like whoever it is that you are, you'll always end up there. You know, it might be a different path, or it might be bringing that part of you to places that maybe you didn't realize you could have that part, like me in mergers and acquisitions. But I feel like you know, if you listen to your calling or to yourself, like you'll always find yourself where you need to be.
Very true. And it's surprising, like, you know, when you're talking about, I recall a moment when I wanted to be a pilot, and to be a pilot, you needed 20/20 vision. And my mom, she had heart issues and all that. And she's like, oh, if you're going to go, you know, this is going to impact my health and all that. And I dropped it, and I haven't gone back to being a pilot or anything like that. But it's surprising. I was recently thinking about taking flying lessons, and you're right. Like, you know, you kind of like go and you find that freedom, whatever it is that you're looking for, it will show up in some other form in your life. Right. So tell us more about your Wall Street. Like, you know, what was your focus in college, and what did you do in finances or with numbers?
Yeah. So people that know me, they wouldn't be like, you were what? You know, like it was not the perfect match. I studied philosophy and political science, again, to appease my parents. And Wall Street, I just ended up there because they would come to recruit at the college that I was at, and they made me an offer, and it was great, and I went. And I learned a lot. You know, it was baptism by fire. I was not a quantitative person, and I'm still not a quantitative person. But I realized, like, one of the lessons there is that it's just a vocabulary. Accounting is logic, and logic is philosophy. You know, but it's just you use a different language to express different things. So they express things in assets and liabilities. And once you understand the language, then you can speak it, and then you can be good at it. And from Wall Street, I went to Silicon Valley. So I actually worked in high tech way back when it was 56K modems. And I don't know if you remember that, but those are like, you dial up and it goes like, dee, 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 dee. You know, like it was... It was very slow. But here I was in my 20s, and I was giving talks to engineers about the technology that we were selling at the time. I'm not an engineer. But again, it's that language, right? Like, as long as I understood what needed to happen, like, I'm not going to go and program the thing for them, but I can explain what it's going to do, because I learned the language that they were speaking. So I feel like wherever it is that you end up, it's just a matter of learning what's behind it. You know, like what language do they use to communicate their skill? And then you can learn it. And does that mean that I'm going to, you know, I wasn't the analytical person that you would go to at Merrill to, you know, to do something, but I could if I had to, you know, because you just learn.
No, very powerful, because it's, as you mentioned, that how you took philosophy, and so many times people are like, oh, I gotta change my career or my niche. How am I going to do it? But those skill sets are very transferable. So tell me, like, you know, in Wall Street Journal, what lessons did you learn?
Well, it was on Wall Street. It wasn't the journal. So I was doing corporate finance and mergers and acquisitions for Latin America. And it was right during the time of Mexico had this really bad crisis in terms of their economics. And I learned, you know, life is fickle. And cycles and companies are fickle. And one of my assignments that we had done an IPO for a Brazilian company, and it did not go well. And so my job, because I spoke Portuguese, was to take the CFO of this electric company from Brazil all around Europe to talk to investors about, like, to calm them about the investment they had made in that company. And, a few years later, the company was doing fantastic. And then a few years later, the government changed and it all went to hell again. And then a few years later, and I grew up in hyperinflation. So I would go to a restaurant for breakfast and they don't even have prices on the menu, because the prices by lunch, it would change. By dinner, it would change. Inflation was just completely out of control.
Wow.
And that was
this was in Brazil?
This was Brazil in the mid 80s. And then they changed the currency, and it was like a lesson in economics just living there. And so then, Brazil was in a really bad place, and then Brazil became a superpower. And then so everything I feel like I learned is, like, everything has its time and everything has its cycle. So when things are up, be humble, because they will come down at some point. But when things are down, be hopeful, because everything, like, nothing stays the same.
Well, that is so true. And I like what you said about the IPO, and that so many companies, there are so many different startups. Mm-hmm. They hustle through so that they have their investors, they get the investors, have that initial public offering. And then, of course, they're looking for a good entrance into the market where their stocks will be a good price, and so many times, like, the prediction is, oh, yeah, it will start out at 405, and then some technology or pharma or anything is there. And then all of a sudden you see a jump of 50-60%, and then a few days down into the market, it crashes or flattens out. So basically, like, what you're telling is that the stock market, sometimes it's up, it's down, and as you keep on going. So having that steady state of mind can do a lot. So it sounds like that's what the learning you brought from, and it goes back to your childhood.
Yeah. And I mean, and I'm not on Wall Street now, so I don't really know, but I do know that over the market, from the time that I was there to the time that is now, is, I don't know how many times more, and then, the Dow Jones than it was back then. But in between, there was a whole lot of ups and downs. So it's that, betting on just like a steady up is kind of, for me, I'm kind of conservative, is the way that I view life, and not just investments, but just life in general. I can get excited and do things and, like, just go for it. But I know that there will be, after that excitement, there will be a lull, and, but overall life keeps going, and usually in a good trajectory for most of us.
Yeah, no, definitely, because it does help. Thinking about, like, what you're talking about, investments, it's investing in yourself, investing in your life, investing in others, investing in money. So anybody who has a decent portfolio will invest in long-term and short-term, and you diversify. You just don't put all your money in stocks, or you just don't put all the money in bonds. You diversify. So if, like, one has a downfall, you'll be able to make it up from another. So you mentioned that from Wall Street, you went into another field. Tell us about that.
So my career has been, like, very winding. So from Wall Street, I was on a path, and I went to Silicon Valley, and then my company transferred me to Santiago de Chile, and I was living there. And I was 28 years old, and I was an expat, and I went a little crazy. I think I got too much responsibility and too much all at once. And I ended up with a very serious drug addiction. And I came back to the US, and that was like 20 something years ago. So I have a lot of compassion for that Christina. It's not who I am anymore, but I was suicidal. I ended up in a mental institution over there. And it's when you realize, like, it was one of the worst moments of my life, but it was also one of those turning points when you say, okay, this is not working, so let me try something else. And again, I focused on, I had started a nonprofit in Chile, and I focused on nonprofits. And when I had my kids, I've always wanted to have a kid, to have kids and to be a mom, and they became my center and my focus. And then I went, I felt like I was getting a PhD in early childhood education because I was going to be the perfect mom. I was going to do everything right, which means like everything opposite of my poor parents. So, I learned so much, and I got so into early childhood education that I became a preschool teacher. And I did that for many years until it became a job. And
oh, wow. That's amazing. And it shows your affinity towards children. And I want to take us a little back into, because there are a lot of people. So first of all, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing.
Mm-hmm.
How did you make that comeback from the addiction and being in a mental institution?
Sure. So it was, I'm not an idiot, right? Like, I don't think I'm an idiot.
Oh,
so,
you're a very wise person.
in the sense that, I had my stomach pumped like 4 or 5 times. And at some point I realized if I really wanted to die, I would have, right? Because I'm not like I would do things, but there was a part of me that wanted to live. And what I came to understand later is that I didn't want to die. I just wanted to stop feeling the way that I was feeling. And I didn't know how. And it is that realization that is like, okay, clearly I'm not dying, right? Like, because I'm not, so I might as well learn how to live. And that's when I became open to listening, because before then you couldn't tell me anything. I knew everything, and I was always right. And so I just started listening to people and following. I went to AA for many, many years, and I did everything those people asked me to do, and my life got better. And I was able to rebuild in a way that was more aligned and authentic to me, so it was, it was a very difficult time for me and for my family as well. But from it came this wonderful life. Everything that I want, like I was raised that, a woman can never be happy without a man. I was like, you have to be, that's how I grew up. And I went crazy because I had just lost I had finished another relationship and I was 30 and oh my God, and I'm never going to be a mom and my biological clock is ticking and whatever. So that's what led me to despair. But what I didn't realize is that all of it that I was going to have on the other side of that despair. I didn't know that I had to get sober and to be good with me in order to have the life that I always dreamed of.
What an amazing comeback. That ultimately something happened that made you decide, like, this is not how I want to live. And that is so powerful.
Yeah.
So powerful. That's just really, really amazing.
But we all have that choice.
Yeah.
And addiction is for me, the way I perceive it is a disease that covers or that impedes your ability to think and your ability to grab onto the things that are your truth. But as soon as there's like this little, there's always like a little line of hope, like a little string that you can grab on. Like as soon as you see it, if you can grab onto it, that's what's going to lead you to the other side, because you have the power inside of you. Nobody can make you think anything without your permission. So if that's absolute control and that's absolute power, you just have to hold on to it. So then you can start thinking and being your way out of that situation. And And 20 years later, so I got married, I had my kids, and I started my business. And my husband, all of a sudden, he was diagnosed with cancer in October, and he died in December. It was.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Thank
so
you.
Sorry for your loss.
Thank you. It was 7 weeks from his diagnosis to his death.
Oh my goodness.
But I remember being in the ICU with him, like holding his hand as he was, as he was dying. And even in the middle of my despair, because I have never felt pain like that. Like he was the love of my life. It was a fairy tale story, coming back from that. But even then, there was that thread. There was that little light inside of me that said, it's like, we've thought our life was over before. There's going to be hope again, and that's why I'm saying is like that thread, if you just like hold on to it and kind of like pull it. So like, that's going to take you to the next evolution of whoever it is that you're meant to be, because you're not, life is not stagnant. We're always changing. Our circumstances changes as women. Maybe we become mothers, maybe we don't, or maybe we have a different job, or maybe we move countries or whatever, but we're always evolving. But that line is always there. It's like, we can continue doing this.
So, wow. You said that ray of hope, you held on to that, but what a loss. And how did you come out of that?
It's a devastating loss. And
of course.
Teenage boys and stuff. And I came out of that, like, grief is a very personal journey, right? And for me, I realized that, let's say that grief is the size of your fist. So when my husband died, my life was the size of that fist as well. Right? Because so it's everything. There's no, like, breathing hurts. It's so difficult. As time passes, my life grows. My grief doesn't change. My love for him doesn't change. But now I have experiences that, as much as it hurts that he's not there, I still have them. I'm still alive. My kids are still doing things. Like, life moves. So life around the grief becomes bigger, and then bigger, and then bigger. But that never changes, right? The grief is always a part of you.
Yeah, the loss is loss, you can't, just can't make it go away. Yeah. No, I like what you said. It's so profound that life grows bigger around the grief. The grief remains the same.
Yeah. And it's the same, when I was in my addiction, or when I quit smoking cigarettes, like somebody told me, the way you feel right now is not an indication of how you're going to feel in just a little bit down the road. So know that this is not the way, this terribleness is not how it's always going to be. It doesn't, that my grief is going to go away, that I'm going to love less or anything like that. But that intensity, I know that that's not how it's going to feel forever. So,
right.
So I held on to that belief as well. And I was encouraged to write a book. And I didn't want to write about me necessarily, and I didn't want to write a grief book. So I wrote sharing the tools that I used during the worst year of my life. Like 2022 was by far, the worst year of my life. But here we are, and everything is okay, so I shared the tools that I used to overcome this year, which coincidentally are the same tools that I have been teaching for years and years for my clients. So it was actually very comforting to know, like, okay, this works for them, and it works in these situations too. It works for me.
Yeah, no. And here's what I found, that just like happiness grows when you share with someone. Similarly, the burden of grief lessens. It doesn't grow, but like when you share, you realize that like you're helping somebody out, and that definitely shifts the focus, because you never know that somebody may be in a situation where you were.
Exactly.
And that brings that fulfillment to the soul and helps you find that meaning as to what happened.
Exactly. And I think, and that also gives you courage, at least in my case, because I read my book is very honest, and like I describe, the things that at first I was like, oh my God, should I do this? Because I thought maybe it will affect the way I work with corporations and things like that, that maybe it'll affect the way that I'm able to work. And I'm a single mom now. But then I was like, if it helps one person out there, then that's good enough. It doesn't, the rest, like if somebody's going to judge by that, that's on them. That's not on me. I'm doing my part. That's how I feel. So it gives me courage to go out there and do things that are uncomfortable, because maybe that's what somebody else out there needs that they won't get unless I am brave enough to share. So.
And here's what I wanted to know is that you mentioned about your book. Tell us about your book and tell us about your business.
Sure. So this is a funny story. When my kids are 20 months apart, so they're very close together, and they're boys. And when they were born, I had this idea. I was like, I'm going to be an active mom. I'm going to take them places and go hiking and blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't even run around the block without gasping for air. So I was like, okay, that's my body and what I want it to do are just not in the same place. So I decided to run a neighborhood 5K, and I ran the race. And when I finished, oh my God, you would have thought I won an Olympic gold medal by how I was feeling. It was like me, like I ran a 5K, like I was the girl in the back of the gym smoking pot, like I was in that cycle.
No, that was an Olympic gold medal for you.
It was. That feeling was my new high. That's what I chased. Right. And that got me into triathlons, and I've done Ironman triathlons, and I've done all kinds of things. Thank you. But then, so I was a teacher, and I missed my own kids' kindergarten Halloween party because I had my class, and I decided to quit my job, but I didn't have anything to do. So I went to the principal at my kids' elementary school, and I was like, what if I do a little run club after school? And I'll donate a part of my proceeds back to the school. And she said, great. And I said, great. And I started, and we had like 15, 20 kids, my kids and their friends, basically. And I took them to a race. And guess what happened to them?
I bet they loved it.
The same thing. They had that feeling of like, oh my God, I just did this. Like, and if I did this, what else can I do? And I realized that I was onto something. So I started creating games and activities inside my after school program that would be challenging, but yet the kids were supported so that on the other side of it, they could be confident. And that's how I started. I created a curriculum. It's called Empower Fit. I started growing I would hear from principals and from teachers and parents, and like, there's just something different about the Run Club kids. Other schools started calling me to go there, to their schools. And in 2018, we moved from Miami to New Mexico. So I started teaching other moms to start their own business to teach this curriculum in their communities. And today we're in over 200 communities in 41 states. We've coached well over 10,000 children. So, that's how it began. And now I translated that curriculum to workforce development and empowerment for companies. And that's what I'm focused on now.
Wow, congratulations. What a journey and what an achievement. So tell us, like, how do you work with the people in the corporate?
Yeah. So corporate is, it's funny because it's, if they had the teachings that we teach in Run Club as kids, they wouldn't have half of the issues that they have as adults. Right. But here we are. And so with companies, we think that having the best strategy is what's going to ultimately make us successful. And it's not. Like I can have the best strategy in the world, but if I don't have the confidence to execute it, it ain't happening. So what I work with corporates are with teams and team meetings, and just I instill confidence and empowerment using a lot of the same tools that we use for the kids, but obviously in an appropriate way. We're not running outside, but it's very experiential. We play games, there's activities, and it's a very profound training. And I'm very proud because at least 30% of our participants say that the training is life-changing, because we're not talking about, well, this is how you get better sales. We're talking about you as an individual and how do you see yourself so that you can become better at your craft, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. Very profound. Tell us about your book.
So my book is called Empowered by Discomfort. It is sold anywhere where books are sold. And it basically are the tools that I used to get through that 2022, the worst year of my life. But there are tools that I teach in these corporate seminars that I teach my clients. It's very easy, practical, unique things that you can do quickly that change something. So I don't know about you, but I can tell you there's at least 2 books, but there's one book in particular that I read that changed the course of my life. And I can pinpoint it because it's a book called Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck from Stanford University. And in that book, it was it hit me at such like an internal way that how I viewed myself from that moment on changed. And that's what I did in my run club and my business. And it's what I teach today to the corporates. I want my book to be that for somebody, because I know that sometimes all it takes is just one exercise or one insight that makes you realize, oh my gosh, that's, that was it. And you change that and everything changes from then forward. And that's what I hope my book does.
I'm sure it will be. You mentioned a couple of things, that it's not about the strategy, it's about the confidence that you have within yourself for execution. So how about sharing a couple of exercises with our audience so they can just kind of go and implement it to increase their confidence?
Sure. And, I suffer from this too, right? Like how many times it's like I have like this great idea or this email, or I made a contact with somebody. I'm like, oh, this is such an important contact. And then the email's sitting there and I just I don't hit send because I'm afraid of what might happen if I hit send. So it's normal, right? And what I tell people is so if it's normal, just embrace it, accept it. Don't beat yourself up because you have it. Just understand that discomfort is part of life, and discomfort or fear is like a flashing light that is telling you, go here if you want to grow. So one thing that you can do, I call it a power wheel, right? So we start with our thoughts. Like I said, nobody can make you think one way or another. They can influence you, but nobody can get in your head and actually think for you. And that's absolute power. So we start there. And then the words that you use are just an expression of those thoughts. And then those thoughts that you repeat over and over and over again become your beliefs. So your beliefs can be given you from the outside, like your religion, your culture, or your beliefs can also come from your own experience, like, oh, I'm pretty, or I'm smart, or I'm athletic. And beliefs are either going to empower you to take some kind of action, or it's going to hold you back. But beliefs are like the gatekeepers. So if you want to change anything in your life, you go to your thoughts and then to your beliefs, to figure out what are the beliefs that you have, and what, the belief is going to cause you to take an action. That action is going to have a result, and that result is going to feed your thought and belief. So I'll give you an example of a positive loop, or let's do a negative one. I'm not good at math, right? Because I said that at the beginning of our interviews. So if I say I'm not good at math and I express that, then if that's my belief, then maybe I don't take a class, or I don't go into engineering, or I don't become an aerospace something or other, because, who am I kidding? I'm not good at math. And then that action is going to have a result that is like, okay, so maybe I'll go into marketing, or maybe I'll go into something else. And that, that is going to influence my thought. It was like, you see, I'm not good at math. I'm good. I'm a right brain or a left brain, whatever it is. Like, I'm an artist because I'm not good at math. That's one loop. But if you say, I'm a really smart person, I'm very creative, then the actions that you take, maybe you sign up for an improv class, or maybe you, you write a book, or maybe you do something that is unique and changing, and that will have the result of people admiring you for that, will just reinforce as like, well, I'm really creative. So if you want to change anything about your life, change your thoughts. Like if there's, so if there's not enough money in the bank account, go back to your thoughts. Why? Ask yourself, well, why does this matter to me? Why do I want it? Like, start challenging how you think about yourself and money, because that's where the answer is.
Yeah, no, definitely change the loop and you'll change the results.
Exactly.
So that was awesome. Thank you for joining us today. Do you want to share where they can connect with you, like your website, and if you have any last words for our audience?
So it's very simple. You can go to empoweredbydiscomfort.com. That's where you can see all my different programs. I have coaching programs, I have corporate programs, speaking, books, all kinds of stuff. So that's kind of the hub. And, shoot me an email. There's a contact information there. Just, send me an email. I tend to reply. People think I'm crazy, but I reply to all the emails that I get. So shoot me up, hit me up, and I will certainly answer you.
Well, that's fantastic. And a lot of nuggets, a lot of learnings. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you, listeners, for being part of our family, because without you, the show would not be possible. And thank you, Juan, for making the show technically possible. And be well. Take care. Until next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.